Hello, I'm Anthony Hobbs, and, well, first things first, I'm very sorry about my previous review, because of course it ended abruptly. Well, there was a malfunction with the machine, and it ended, but that was in fact the first half of my review of The Wrath of Khan. So here's the second half, so I'll start where I left off. I said how, yes, I really like the space battles and the Mutara Nebula. Star Trek II is much more action-orientated than the first one. Yes, we see lots of great space battles in outer space, a bit of fighting on the ground as well, yeah, because they wanted a totally different style to the first one. And it worked, they pulled it off brilliantly, yeah. And Star Trek II, the story has nothing at all to do with the events of Star Trek the Motion Picture, no. It's a sequel to an episode, rather than a sequel to the film. It's a sequel to the 1960s episode called Space Seed. And in that story we see Khan. He tries to take over the ship and kill Captain Kirk, but he fails, and his punishment is being marooned on a planet. And him and his crew get to rule that whole planet. They're marooned there. But in a way, that's not really much of a punishment, is it? Getting to rule the whole planet, you're an emperor of a whole world. That's not really a punishment. But ironically, it is a punishment afterwards, because they're on SETI Alpha 5, a different planet explodes, the backlash makes their planet, the atmosphere, go haywire, and it becomes an inhospitable desert world. So yes, it is a punishment then, and it's so awful. In fact, the atmosphere can barely sustain any life at all. It's a really horrible place to live. It's so inhospitable, in fact, that Terrell and Chekhov confuse it with a lifeless planet. Yes, so that explains why Khan wants revenge on Captain Kirk for not checking on him to make sure he's okay. But then, what is marooned? How do you define the word marooned? Yeah, that means never checked on, left there forever. That was his punishment. But Khan wants revenge for not being checked on, and there's always a reason. You know, Khan never does something bad for the sake of it. There's always a reason behind his actions, so he wants revenge. And he's not a brainless thug, he's an intellectual, and he quotes from literature and stuff. And the thing is, in Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, the actor, Leonard Nimoy, didn't want to do any more Star Trek films. He said, I'll only do another one if I'm killed off, because that way I definitely don't have to do any more. And yes, they did that, and yes, very sad at the end when Spock dies. He gives his life to save the others. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And in a way, I mean, I'm glad they did more sequels, but in a way it would have been good if that was the last one. A good way to end it, end with a bang, end on the best one, And after Spock dies, the actor Leonard Nimoy, he says, "Space, the final frontier. These are the continuing voyages of the Starship Enterprise." So hearing his voice like that, and the character's just died, it's almost like it's the voice of his ghost or something, Oh, a quick nitpick here. Ricardo Montalban, brilliant actor, definitely the definitive Khan, except he does the voice with a Mexican accent. The character is called Khan Noonien Singh. Shouldn't that be an Indian character with an Indian accent? But in a way, it doesn't really matter about the accent, so long as you play the character well. And yes, Ricardo Montalban played the character extremely well. Okay, I'm going to put this here, there. Okay, we're a slightly different angle now. That's the video there, the front cover. And yeah, Star Trek II, very different to Star Trek the Motion Picture. Lots more action, and also a bit more militarized. Yes, the Federation starships, they're more like a military now. And Gene Roddenberry didn't quite like that idea. He said, no, the Federation isn't military, they're explorers. But the franchise had to take a different direction. It had to change slightly, be more adventure-orientated, more action. They had to change the style to get a bigger audience. And they did. They got a much bigger audience, yes. Star Trek was cool again. It wasn't just some old TV show. And you don't need to be a Star Trek fan to enjoy it. Because unlike a lot of the 60s episodes, it's not played for laughs or with a silly style. It's a very serious tone. It's more real, more like real people, the way the acting's done. It's like real people in a dire situation. So that they made it as more realistic, yeah. And yes, it's I've never read the book A Tale of Two Cities, but they quote it in the film. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And that phrase has a double meaning, because Star Trek II was the best of times, the best adventure, and also the worst of times, because Spock dies. So yes, it has a double meaning, and it's all the more sad because of course Leonard Nimoy died in real life, so it's very sad indeed. Well, okay, all that's left to say is Star Trek II, definitely the best thing that came out of the franchise, and it is still my favourite Star Trek film. Okay, thanks for watching and take care.